With us now is Josh Holmes, a longtime and veteran political operative. He's founding partner of Cavalry LLC, co-host of the Ruthless Variety Program podcast, which I do recommend and appear on very occasionally. Josh, always good to have you back here.
Guy, it is a pleasure. How you doing, sir?
Well, I'm still just trying to wrap my brain around this new story from Axios that actually, come to think of it, Kamala Harris is for the border wall after all, something she vociferously opposed for years. Now she is committing, according to Axios from the campaign, hundreds of millions of dollars to building the border wall. She's even featured Trump border wall in her new ad, trying to paint her as tough at the border. I mean, part of it is just hilarious, but part of it is scary because she's doing this on everything with no scrutiny and seems to be rewarded for it.
Oh, God, it's the saddest thing in the world. I mean, the cynicism involved in just the audacity to try to say that the border czar, who happily ushered in a repeal of all the Trump-era border security issues that were actually securing this country, who decided she didn't have any responsibility to go to the actual border, who told us in countless times throughout the years that there was no border problem at all, is now all of a sudden tough on the border because she's got a political problem. I mean, the biggest issue here that I think you're getting a window into, that I'm hopeful that the American public writ large will get a view of over the next 60 days, is that this is one of the most intellectually bankrupt politicians that anyone has ever seen. And, you know, can you say that she's just vacant? Sure. Can you say that she is absolutely zero qualifications for the job? Absolutely, you can say that. But I think what's scarier is that throughout her entire career, remember, she's never had a race against a Republican. I mean, she's from California. They have this weird runoff. She just sort of runs on vibes and magic.
She had one. She had one in 2010, and she barely won it by less than 1 point when the rest of the ticket won by double digits. So that's the one exception, and she almost blew it.
Right. But I guess my larger point is that there is absolutely zero correlation in her entire career between what she says in terms of a campaign or what she's trying to present and what she actually does when she has the power to do it, right? I mean, this is somebody who is leading the American public to believe that despite being the last person out of the room in the National Economic Council meetings, that she has absolutely no idea what it is the Biden administration has done on the issues of inflation or the economy or tanked all of that for the American people. She is the person who is the last person in the room when they're talking about issues of national security, and yet has no culpability whatsoever for the disastrous Afghanistan retreat from Joe Biden and everyone else. And now she's telling us that despite being the border czar, that she's tough on the border. That would have been nice to see at some point over the last 3.5 years as we've ushered in complete disaster upon the American public.
Now, you mentioned the economy, so let's just transition into that here. Really good ad from the Trump campaign. I saw it yesterday for the first time on social media. Apparently, they're putting a lot of money behind it in the swing states, and it opens with like words on the screen that say something to the effect of, finally, the debate we've all been waiting for. And it's a debate between Kamala Harris and Kamala Harris. She is, in half of the clips, speaking a few weeks ago in North Carolina when she was decrying the state of the economy and how everything costs way too much, which is why she's going to try to impose disastrous price controls. That was her so-called solution. But she was at least spelling out the problem of the pain that people are feeling because of her policies with Joe Biden. And then we have her as vice president cheerleading for Joe Biden and Bidenomics and the very policies that caused the problems. Here they go ping-ponging back and forth on different screens, like on people's TV screens, people's phones. It's really well produced, and it just kind of speaks for itself. Cut 3.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Everyday prices are too high. Food, rent, gas, back to school clothes. That is called Bidenomics. A loaf of bread cost 50% more today. Ground beef is up almost 50%. There's not much left at the end of the month.
Bidenomics is working.
The price of housing has gone up. It feels so hard to just be able to get ahead.
And we are very proud of Bidenomics.
Josh, that is a clean 30-second hit right there.
It really is a clean 30-second hit. I'm glad they're doing it. They're really prosecuting the case here. And I think some outside groups that I've seen are doing the same on a range of issues. But I think it's kind of the opening sell, though, right? I mean, at first you need to convince everybody that she's a two-faced liar, which doesn't take a lot of convincing from anybody who's open-minded. But it's actually much more sinister than that, in that what I just discussed, it's not that she actually has had a change of opinion. It's that she'll say absolutely anything that she thinks will get her a little closer to the finish line. And so, hey, Bidenomics, not very popular. We're going to be opposed to all of that right up until the point where you give me the keys to the kingdom, at which point I'll go Bidenomics times 10, which is what she's talking about with price gouging and telling everybody it's their grocery store's responsibility for the economics that this administration put in place. I mean, it's way, way, way more sinister than the old John Kerry wind sale where you're going back and forth on issues and you're just sort of a whimsical character. She knows exactly what she's doing here. She's lying to your face and she thinks you're going to buy it because she's not going to do an interview and get the press to tell her tale.
And she doesn't know what her actual positions need to be for the next 2 months and how to explain the reconciliation between what she's going to be saying through anonymous staffers versus everything she said forever in her own voice on national television in a lot of cases, which brings us to this interview point. They are saying, Harris World, that they are going to schedule an interview by the end of this month. And there's only a few days left. I think it would be just perfect for it to be Labor Day weekend if this is when they do it. That sounds right to me. Labor Day weekend, bury it in a long holiday weekend. She has gone nearly 40 days and 40 nights as the nominee of a major party who got no votes, by the way, in the primary process without doing a single interview. She's done fewer than a dozen questions, period, on anything, like shouted questions. I believe one of them was on policy when she said her new massive $1.5 trillion spending proposal would pay for itself, and she used the words return on investment 4 times in 1 minute. That was the only substantive question that she's taken on policy. Nothing about any of her past comments or statements or stances, nothing, and no interviews. And there's a story today in Politico that, again, in some ways is high comedy and in some ways is just like, how is this real? The headline is Inside Harris's Big Interview Decision. And it's like a deep dive into all the internal deliberations and machinations around what to do about this interview and when to do it and who it should be. And it's like an all hands on deck thing. I see they've quoted or they've name checked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 7 or 8 people at the very highest levels involved in the decision about, Josh, doing one interview as a candidate for president. They're treating it like whether they should go to nuclear war or something with a foreign adversary. It's like a single interview, and Politico has the deep dive into the gut-wrenching process that they're struggling through.
Yeah, that's the story, right, as Politico sees it, is it's like, well, let's get deep into the aides thought process about what would do the least amount of damage to somebody running for the president of the United States by talking to someone that's outside of their paid staff. I mean, that's basically what they're talking about right now. And it is so sad that we've gotten to a place. I mean, look, you can say what you want about Donald Trump or J.D. Vance. Both of them, on the regular, make themselves entirely available to press. In fact, it looks like they enjoy it. I mean, J.D. Vance, you see him on the campaign trail these days. It looks like he welcomes it. I mean, he walks up to people and looks for a jousting partner. This candidate in Kamala Harris is not only so nervous, it's taken her 40 days to book something, but they've involved the better part of a battalion to try to figure out what the best venue is to do it. So I don't want to raise people's expectations about the idea that somehow the first interview that she's going to bomb. I mean, can you imagine the amount of access journalism that needs to go into assuring them that this is going to be a good experience when you've got, a third of the Army that's basically entirely dedicated to making sure it's a good one?
Oh, I mean, a lot of the journalists don't want her to do the interviews because they're worried that she wouldn't do great, and they want her to win. So the people you would think would theoretically, I mean, Jonathan Martin was out there being like, oh, Republicans are just mad that she's not doing interviews because they're upset that the dynamic of the race has changed. It's like, sir, you should be, your whole community of professionals, if you want to call yourselves that, should be the ones on the rooftops shouting that anyone seeking elective office should be doing lots of interviews and make themselves available and try to be transparent and answer questions. And instead they're like taking these little shards of sentences from anonymous aides and treating them as now, like they're written on some sort of stone that came down from the heavens, and that's now officially her position, and it's some right-wing talking point to say that people running for president should take questions. I mean, it's just like, I feel like we are just like losing our minds collectively. I saw this as well from the same Politico story, Josh. Quote, Harris campaign staff have been asking reporters who they think she should talk to, which is just perfect. It's like family meeting, guys. All right, I know we're all on the same team. You got to do some base outreach. Look, we have to do this. We all know we have to do this at some point. Who do you think we should do this with? Like, it's like a little meeting of Democratic strategists here, official and unofficial, trying to decide which journalist should be bestowed with the opportunity to have a carefully crafted interview, first, maybe only interview, with the woman running for president. It's wild.
Well, the funniest part is, from my perspective, is it's such a foreign concept, right? Growing up in Republican communication circles, the idea that a journalist would give you any good advice about what you ought to do for your continued success is just it would just never happen. And the fact that this is all just sort of an open secret to the point where you can print that in Politico is really something. But it tells you exactly where it is that the corporate mainstream media has been when they're dealing with presidential politics. I mean, they will do absolutely anything and everything, including apparently being a supplemental aid to these people, where they're telling them, well, you might get more reach with this person, or this person might be fair, or, I bet you can negotiate a series of questions. I mean, we're not too far removed from Democratic journalists giving debate questions over to Democratic presidential candidates. So, yeah, I mean, look, this is going to be hard fought. And the Republicans, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Republicans writ large are going to get no favors out of the press. They've got to drive it home with ads like the one that you just played.
One more element from this Politico story that I think is so telling. This is from their Playbook newsletter. This is like a sub-bullet point. What about Tim? I don't know if you've seen this, Josh. Listen to this. This is amazing. One of the issues that Harris World is currently working to address is how to deploy running mate Tim Walz in the media. The danger in sending him out to do big solo interviews is that he might not have full command of where Harris is on every issue. As someone pointed out to us last night, Harris talks about the opportunity economy, but if Walz were asked to define it, would he know how? And I'm sitting here, and I read it twice. The danger in sending him, meaning the running mate, out to do big solo interviews is that he may not have full command of where Harris is on every issue. No one has full command of where she is on every issue, including her. That's the whole point of this. She knows where her instincts are. She's a leftist, but she also knows she has to say a bunch of other stuff for the cameras for 2.5 more months. And, I mean, it would be, in some ways, very interesting to see Tim Walz have to go out there and try to, divine what his running mate's positions are on things, but that's too risky. So he has also not been out there doing interviews. Within hours of J.D. Vance being selected, not even nominated yet, at the RNC, he was taking questions. Yes, from Sean Hannity, who's right-leaning, but he asked some tough questions, and Vance has taken so many questions since then. Tim Walz has taken 0 questions and no interviews, just like Kamala Harris, because by their own admission, They don't know what their positions are on the issues and therefore can't defend them.
Yeah, I mean, you put your thumb on it. I mean, that's the biggest thing is whatever they have him go out and say, it's subject to poll change or a focus group change the next week in which she'll entirely reverse herself and embarrass him in the process. I think we're talking about Coach Walz, right? The legendary Coach Walz that all of a sudden we found out was a volunteer defensive coordinator. I mean, his biography in and of itself is hilarious and revisionist and changes by the minute.
In every way.
So I'm not sure that they have any story straight. The only thing that they've got going for them is a bunch of whiz-bang and the rollout of a new candidate, which, their view is the first team that switches their candidate on the top wins. And as long as you can stay away from any serious conversation about what they stand for, they have a puncher's chance. The sad thing is that they might be right. This is going to be an entirely close race, in large part because they have rejuvenized a Democratic base that had long left Joe Biden that now are on board for the big win, and they don't give a darn about what it is that she stands for so much as it is winning, and that fits perfectly with the Democratic establishment in this day and age.
Well, now she's a tax cutter. She's a border hawk. She loves the border wall. No tax on tips. I mean, you got tough on crime prosecutor. I mean, it's like a complete facelift for about 2 months, and they just have to get to November 5th and try not to really step in it in any way, and maybe they'll win. That's obviously the plan. They've got literally active collaborators in the news media, and we'll see if they're able to get away with this, because it's a proof of concept that is rather alarming to me and would be alarming to anyone in the journalism field, I would think, if they weren't hardcore partisans, but they are exactly what we think they are. Josh Holmes will be listening to Ruthless as usual, and we look forward to talking to you again very soon.
Good talking to you, Guy. Pleasure as always.